Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Drop, created for people with diabetes by people who have diabetes. By Real Good Foods, real food you feel good about eating. And by Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
This week, a look at a way of eating that sounds, frankly, really hard to do. But the guys behind it say it's the key for lowering insulin resistance in people with all types of diabetes. Even so, it seems a little extreme.
And I come down to the Christmas Day meal and I literally have a pyramid of bananas. We're talking 4 bananas on the bottom, then 3, then 2, then 1, like a true pyramid of ripe bananas. And that's how they eat for my Christmas dinner. Now, they were just shaking their head like this. They were kind of laughing and thinking, this is not going to last. There's no way. Because they'd seen me try a lot of different diets over the years.
Robby Barbaro is the co-author of a new book called Mastering Diabetes. We'll talk about what he actually eats now and why he is so passionate about this. He has a pretty compelling story. In Tell Me Something Good, when an avid scuba diver is diagnosed with type 1, she finds a way to get back in and under the water. Plus, a little bit of a Control IQ update for us. We'll tell you how it's working out. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of Diabetes Connections. I'm your host, Stacey Simms. So glad to have you along. We aim to educate and inspire by sharing stories of connection when it comes to type 1 diabetes. My son was diagnosed right before he turned 2, and that was 13 years ago now. My husband lives with type 2 diabetes. I do not have diabetes, but I do have a background in broadcasting, in radio and television, local news, and that's how you get the podcast. A lot to talk about this week. We will get to Mastering Diabetes in just a moment, but I want to give you a quick update on our experience transitioning over to Control IQ. This is the newest hybrid closed-loop software. This one comes from Tandem Diabetes. You need a t:slim X2 insulin pump along with a Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor. And then the Control IQ is the software that is in the pump. If you're not interested in this, if you're not using this kind of pump, or if you are on MDI, or, just skip ahead a few minutes, I do have time codes, as always, in these newer transcribed episodes for this year. So you can open the episode homepage, open the notes, and you can skip right ahead to the interview. But if you want to know about our Control IQ experience, here's how it's going. We were able to get the new software very early on. We got it, I want to say, the 3rd week of January. We did not get it without issue. Benny's pump was one of the few that could not be updated by plugging it in. There was some issue with the software update that was already in the pump. And even everybody who had that version of the software, only a very small percentage, my understanding, couldn't actually plug into the computer and update. Anyway, Tandem sent us a new pump with Control IQ on it. And of course, I was to send the old pump back. So we updated immediately. It started doing its thing. I will go into more detail about after a month of use. Benny and I are going to sit down and talk about it. But wow, it really made a difference right away. The problem was that it was tanking him. He was going low overnight, every night. And I try to not make changes until about 2 or 3 days, right? We have to kind of see how things go. You don't want to overreact. So he went low the first 3 nights. And then, of course, we changed it because I'm talking down to 40, for extended periods of time. We cut way back on basal. We also cut insulin sensitivity, which really shouldn't affect it when it's in that sleep mode, because the sleep mode doesn't give boluses. But we cut back on that anyway because it seemed to be having some issues with corrections during the day, really making him go lower than he should have and having to suspend insulin. After that, it really smoothed out. He was using less insulin. He was in range a very much increased amount of time. You could see his numbers were coming down. It was really cool. Even on a day where he completely forgot to bolus for a big brownie in the afternoon, he went way up, but he didn't stay up. And if you've done that, you know that, well, at least for us, if you have really, let's be honest, 50 uncovered carbs, 40, 50 uncovered carbs, you're going to go up to 300 and stay there for a while. But Control IQ, he did have to bolus, but Control IQ brought him down really quickly. It was great. But unfortunately, it didn't stay great. About 2 weeks in, his pump, the brand new pump that they had just sent us, it broke. It gave us one of those alarms that you can't reset. Oh, my goodness. So I was actually on my way out of town. That was the weekend I was heading to Maine. And Benny was going to be leaving that afternoon for a 2-day wrestling tournament. So, yeah, he could have done shots, but we were just like, oh, my goodness, what are we going to do? Well, I hadn't actually sent that other pump back yet. It was on my list of things to do, I promise, but I hadn't gotten around to it. So luckily, he put on the old Basal IQ pump, the previous software. My husband called Tandem, and, they went through the troubleshooting. Is this an alarm that can be cleared? It could not. So they overnighted another Control IQ pump, and I put return the pump on my list of things to do yet again. But then, so Benny is at a 2-day wrestling tournament. It was supposed to be 1 day unless they won, which they did, which meant they went to the state championships, which, spoiler alert, they won. So it was 2 days of travel and crazy food and then celebration food and parties. Oh, my goodness. And as you know, if you've been listening a while, Benny is not actually wrestling this season. He's acting more like the manager because he hurt his knee. So he's doing great. Very exciting to be a freshman and have the first school state championship for the wrestling team. It was very, very cool. But anyway, all right, so back to the pump situation. So then on Sunday, he's home. He's got the new Control IQ pump on. And then early Monday morning, I want to say 5 o'clock in the morning, transmitter failure. Not, we're not sure, not sensor error, not sensor failure, transmitter error for the Dexcom. So Benny turned it off. I didn't even know. He just kind of clicked off and went back to sleep until 6. I mean, he got 1 more hour of sleep. That transmitter was 2 weeks old. It's not supposed to crap out that early, of course. So we had to pull the sensor, the transmitter, put a whole new set on. Of course, I called Dexcom and they replaced everything. But then we're another day, really a day and a half between everything that was going on without Control IQ. So I can say when it's working, thumbs up. When the technology's not working, which will happen, right? He's fine. I mean, we could always go back to shots, certainly, but who wants to do that? So a little frustrating, but we moved forward. The only advice I have if you're about to start Control IQ, if you're thinking about it, if you haven't made the switch over yet, is I would highly recommend, and please talk to your endocrinologist before doing this, make the change for insulin duration. Change over to 5 hours now because that's not negotiable on the Control IQ system. And most of us have it set, frankly, incorrectly because we're making up for it in other ways. A lot of studies have been done on this. I'm sure if you're familiar at all with Control IQ, you've heard this. But if you haven't, one of the things we did was set the insulin duration to 5 hours several weeks before starting. And I think it really helped us in the transition. Something to think about, something to talk to your endo about, and then you just got to be patient, make changes slowly, and let it do its job. It's so hard when we're used to managing these dumb pumps, right? And do this, do that, and stay on top of that. To let it do its thing is very difficult. Okay, let's get to mastering diabetes in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Real Good Foods and brand new from them, stand-alone crusts. So you can create your own pizza, put whatever toppings you want. But this is a cook and serve pizza crust, grain-free. It's made with cauliflower. I mean, Real Good Foods. They are delicious, high in protein, low in carb, grain-free, gluten-free, lots of varieties. I mean, they have the pizzas that have great toppings on them. They have stuffed chicken. They have breakfast sandwiches, huge variety. I like it because it's really easy to find in my grocery store freezer. But you can go online and order the whole shebang. Find out all the different products that they have and mix and match. Find out more. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Real Good Foods logo. My guest this week is one of the authors of the new book, Mastering Diabetes. These guys also have a podcast. Robby Barbaro and Dr. Cyrus Khambatta say focusing on lowering insulin resistance through food is the key to living well with all types of diabetes. Robby lives with type 1, and I promise he's really not saying anything out of bounds here, like, this is going to get you off insulin or this is a cure. But there are some unconventional thoughts that he shares in this interview. As always, when I talk to people who are focusing on a particular way of eating, and I do this all the time. We've talked to people who eat low carb, people who eat, high fat, keto, people who are making these claims on the podcast. This is not something that I verify or confirm during the interview. I do my best to give you all the information, but again, before you make any changes, please talk to your endo. I really did enjoy talking to Robby. Here's our conversation.
Robby, thank you so much for joining me. I am so intrigued by everything I have read and heard. Thanks for coming on.
Stacey, it's really an honor to be here. I love your show, and the fact that I'm getting to be on it is just really exciting to me.
Oh, thank you so much. We have so much to talk about. I have so many questions for you. But I want to start at your beginning. You had a fairly typical, from what I've seen, onset of type 1 diabetes as a teenager, as a tween, really. But you were diagnosed by your brother?
Yes, it truly is a fascinating story. So on January 26th, that'll be the day that I have lived with type 1 diabetes for 20 years. So yeah. I was 12, just about to turn 13, and I complained to my mom. I said, Mom, I am thirsty all the time. I'm going to the bathroom all the time. I think I have diabetes just like Steve. So I have two older brothers. The middle one, Steve, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 8 years prior to me. And I was pretty sure I had diabetes. And my mom said, no, I don't think you do. Don't be silly. I said, okay, fine. And then eventually she went out of town to go look at homes in Florida where we eventually moved. So it was just myself and my middle brother at home. And she called to check in and she said, hey, how are things going? I said, Mom, I couldn't sleep last night. I was cramping. She said, okay, go upstairs, use your brother's blood glucose meter and test yourself. And I was well over 400. And my brother said right then and there, okay, you have type 1 diabetes, pack your bags, you're going to be in the hospital for a few nights. So we went to the regular general doctor. They ran a few tests. And I remember the doctor coming in and said, yep, you have type 1 diabetes. We're going to send you to the hospital. And that was the first time I had seen my middle brother crying as an adult. And he just said, oh, man, I'm just sorry you have to experience this too. And my parents flew home the next night. And they said, the thing that really stayed with me was my dad saying, don't worry, it's just an inconvenience. You can still do whatever you want in life. And that was really the mentality that my parents had. And really, they were very, very supportive, very encouraging, and really let myself and my brother really take charge of our diabetes care. And, we were both already, type A people that really were on top of it. And we had good medical care from the Mayo Clinic. So I'm fortunate to say, it didn't really crush me. I really had a really supportive environment. I had the tools I needed, and it just began a new life with type 1 diabetes.
I'm really intrigued by your brother's reaction because on the one hand, here you have a brother who's 9 years older than you. You look up to him, I'm sure, and you see that he's probably doing pretty well with this. So on the one hand, it's okay, I'm going to be fine. But then he gets emotional and he's sad for you. So that had to have been tough to digest as a kid. Like, I'm going to be okay, but ooh. There is this sadness.
Yeah, did it? Sure. The whole thing was honestly, it kind of like, I sort of remember certain bits and pieces. I remember driving in the car and talking to my parents on the phone, and just, it didn't hit me. Like, I didn't kind of fully understand what was going on, but I guess I just eased into it. And at some point, I guess you don't really have a choice. It is what it is,
Yeah, no doubt. So the years go on. I assume that you were treated more traditionally in terms of you start on insulin, you're eating a particular diet, your parents are keeping you busy in school. But you had other health issues as a teen.
I did. I had plantar fasciitis, which was frustrating. I was a competitive tennis player. So that's really a painful feeling in your feet when you're walking and trying to run. So I would wear these big blue boots at night to try and help with passive stretching to deal with plantar fasciitis. I had chronic allergies all the time. So I took Nasonex and Claritin D, and I would still get sick. As a teenager, I had cystic acne, which was really frustrating, and I tried everything. Microdermabrasion treatments, laser treatments, oral creams, like creams for my face and oral medications. Eventually, they put me on Accutane, and that's one of the most serious drugs you can take for acne. Your parents actually have to sign a waiver because some people have committed suicide on that drug. Yeah. So I also had warts on my feet. So these were just a collection of, frustrating, I think, standard symptoms that a lot of people have.
Wow. So when did all the fruit stuff start? When did you decide that this is the way to go? I mean, I'm sorry.
So really, yeah. I mean, I'll tell you the journey to getting to the fruit stuff. So growing up, this is when I was living in Minnesota, doing standard diabetes care. We went to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. We lived in St. Cloud, and we would go there, and they just had a great team. We had an endocrinologist, I had a dietitian, I had a psychologist. So it was a team effort there. And the key thing I remember learning from them was like using a logbook, and I actually got quite good at that. But I had standard care. And my dad was into selling supplements through a network marketing company. And getting exposed to what they were teaching and some of their educational material was the very beginning of me really considering, okay, wait a minute, there's something to nutrition, there's something to diet outside of just following a standard American diet, not really thinking about it. So that was the beginning. And it was a slow evolution of learning. Okay, wait a minute, trying to avoid additives or foods like MSG, like that's good. That's a good idea for your overall health. And I slowly progressed. Eventually, I came across many different lifestyles, but as I was on this journey of learning as much as I could, I came across a book called Natural Cures They Don't Want You to Know About by Kevin Trudeau. Now, I'm not recommending this book. This guy ended up in jail. Yeah. There's some things he was like selling commercials. I'm not recommending it, but I came across this book and it planted a seed in my mind that, you know what, maybe it's possible to reverse type 1 diabetes. If I just eat as healthy as humanly possible and I take care of my body, maybe I can put myself in such a healthy state that my body will regenerate new beta cells. And that was it was the theory, the hypothesis. Okay, wait a minute. Like, I know other people haven't done this, but hey, somebody has to do it first. For example, Roger Bannister was the first person to run a 4-minute mile. And before he did, the smartest people in the world said, that's impossible. Your heart will explode. And once he did it, other people started doing it. So I do think we're gonna figure this out at some point, some way, how to get beta cells to work again naturally. I do believe that, but that's not happened. So I go down this mission of, okay, I will do anything and everything to give my body the best chance of healing itself. So I started learning about the concept of fasting. So fasting is when you go to bed at night, you're doing like a mini fast, and in the morning you eat breakfast, you're breaking your fast. And healing and regeneration happens over that time. So I said, okay, what type of dietary habits can I do to increase the chance of my body healing itself? And this led me to try several diets. The first thing I tried was a Weston A. Price Foundation diet, and that was eating a lot of grass-fed beef. They advocate for raw milk. I remember going to farmers markets, and I would buy milk for cats because you can't sell raw milk to humans, or at least you couldn't at that time. And again, I did see some improvements as I cleaned up my diet and got rid of any sort of junk and processed food. There was definitely some improvements, but I didn't see anything specific happen to my diabetes health or my insulin intake or my blood glucose control. So I continued to learn more. And eventually I came across a diet by the name of Dr. Gabriel Cousens. And he was in a movie, or he produced a movie called Raw for 30 Days. And in this movie, he showed how people following his protocol, which is essentially a plant-based ketogenic diet. He didn't call it that at the time because ketogenic diets weren't really popular, but that's what it was. I would eat lots of nuts and seeds, lots of vegetables and oil. Like that's basically where my calories are coming from on this phase 1 Gabriel Cousens program. And you got to remember, everything I'm doing here is with this mindset of, okay, I'm going to reverse type 1 diabetes. I'm going to heal this. This is strong why, this strong motivation. So at this point, I am a freshman in college at the University of Florida.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right here with a question.
Yeah.
So you're trying this experiment. You're experimenting on yourself, basically. I mean, to boil it down. And were you still seeing your endocrinologist? Were they telling you, dude, you're losing weight. Let's be careful. Was anybody giving you pushback at that point?
Right back to Robby. We'll find out what his endo said. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by OneDrop. Getting diabetes supplies is a pain. Not only the ordering and the picking up, but also the arguing with insurance over what they say you need and what you really need. Make it easy with OneDrop. They offer personalized test strips. Plus, you get a Bluetooth glucose meter, test strips, lancets, and your very own certified diabetes coach. Subscribe today to get test strips for less than $20 a month. Delivered right to your door. No prescriptions or copays required. One less thing to worry about. Not that surprising when you learn that the founder of OneDrop lives with type 1. They get it. OneDrop, gorgeous gear, supplies delivered to your door, 24/7 access to your certified diabetes coach. Learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the OneDrop logo. Now, back to my interview with Robby, and I'm asking him if with all the weird things he was doing with food, if his endo gave him any pushback.
Okay, this is a great question. Yes, I would see my endocrinologist every 3 months. You got to get your prescriptions and whatnot. And here's the interesting part. I think probably a lot of people with type 1 are going to have a similar experience, which is unfortunate. But they never asked me about my diet.
Oh, wow.
I kid you not. I have been through, except for the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic, they were very detailed. They asked me everything I ate. They logged it. They kept track of it. But after that, I had 2 different endocrinologists in Florida. And I think I've had 1 different one in Los Angeles. And not a single one of them, not a single appointment, have they asked me exactly what foods do you eat. Not one.
That's interesting because I don't think our endo, and Benny's a child, obviously, so he hasn't really asked me, what do you eat? But they sent us to a dietitian or a nutritionist years and years ago. We never really followed up. But, he's asked us just kind of like, what are you, especially when Benny was little, what are your favorite foods? What's your favorite fruit? What's your favorite vegetable? He would kind of play. He was great with kids, and ask him about that. But we definitely talked about food, and he knows how we eat. So that's really fascinating. All right. So you're on the sly. Nobody's following up on you. You're doing fine.
Yeah. I mean, and the key thing was, I think from the endocrinologist perspective, to give them a little bit of credit, I guess, is that my A1Cs were always quite good. There was
no need for them to go in depth.
Yeah, exactly. There wasn't a need to prod and figure, hey, how can I really help this guy? I appeared healthy. All my other blood work was fine. My A1C was fine. I think they just were okay, he's doing great. Let's just go on to the next patient. So at this point, this is where it gets interesting. This is where I love to talk about the diabetes nuances because your audience is going to understand this stuff. At this point, I'm a freshman at the University of Florida. And again, my mindset is, how can I, take less and less insulin and eventually not need any? That's the goal. And in hindsight, what I realize is what really matters is if you're taking less and less insulin, that's only really significant in regards to reversing type 1 diabetes if you are also starting to produce more of your own. If your C-peptide level is increasing, if your beta cells are starting to become functional again, that would be a good thing. But in this case, I was dropping my insulin. At this point, I was taking 10 total units of insulin per day. I was using only fast-acting insulin, and I was actually still doing it through MDI, which I would not recommend, but I would actually take small injections throughout the night. And I was eating 30 grams of carbohydrate per day, no more than 30 grams.
Wow.
So my carbohydrate to insulin ratio was 3-to-1, and that's a metric of insulin sensitivity. So you can calculate your 24-hour insulin sensitivity by taking your total carbohydrate consumption, dividing it by your total insulin consumption. This was good. I was getting so excited. Eventually, I reached a plateau. I thought it was dropping and dropping and dropping, and then it just stayed around 10. And the problem was I had terribly low energy, and I was losing weight. That was the big problem. I couldn't keep weight on, and I was on campus, had several situations where I just basically blacked out. I would have to stop. That feeling of, okay, wait a minute, what's going on? I have to recalibrate, get home, rest. And it was scary. So I went back to my naturopath who I'd seen throughout high school, who would help me with a lot of supplements and food sensitivities and stuff like that. I said, okay, what can I do next? And she said, okay, maybe you could benefit from chelation therapy. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll do that. But it was going to be very expensive, and I was going to have to drive from Gainesville, Florida to Tampa, Florida to be able to do this. And I was ready to commit to it. I would do anything to continue pursuing this path. Now, before I committed, I heard a podcast, and this is where the fruit comes in. So I heard a podcast from this guy, Doug Graham. He's a chiropractor, and he was talking about how people who eat, healthy diets and, lots of fruit, that can actually also help detoxify your body. Like the nutrient density can help your body eliminate, heavy metals and toxic substances. So I'm like, okay, wait a minute. This guy's telling me I get to eat all this fruit. He's telling me it's going to have these healing properties. This sounds a lot more exciting than doing the chelation therapy. So I'm going to give this a shot. And that was the beginning of the journey of eating fruit. So this guy, Doug Graham, he teaches basically a fruitarian diet to a certain extent. I would not call myself a fruitarian. I don't think I follow a fruitarian diet, but I start working with him. And this is September of 2006. In December of 2006 is when his book comes out. And I read the book straight through. And one of the testimonials in the back of the book is my co-founder of Mastering Diabetes, Cyrus Kambata. So his testimonials in the back. He is also living with type 1 diabetes. he had this amazing transformation of his health and his insulin sensitivity, and I was blown away. So I go Google his name, I learned some more. I see pictures of him on the internet, like, wow, this guy's ripped, he's fit, like, this is awesome. I'm very optimistic. I'm going to do this. And so I start working with Dr. Graham, and I start eating lots and lots of fruit. Like, literally the first week, I ate nothing but bananas. The second week, I ate bananas and lettuce. And then I continued to add mono meals of fruit. Like, this is the beginning. I eat it much differently now, but.
I can't wait to hear because this sounds horrible, but go ahead.
So it was kind of like, it was like an elimination diet to a certain extent. This is around Christmas time now of 2006. And I remember my grandmother was in town for the holidays. And I come down to the Christmas Day meal, and I literally have a pyramid of bananas. We're talking 4 bananas on the bottom, then 3, then 2, then 1, like a true pyramid of ripe bananas. And that's what I eat for my Christmas dinner. And they were just shaking their head like this. They were kind of laughing and thinking, this is not going to last. There's no way. Because they'd seen me try a lot of different diets over the years. And little did they know, it's basically lasted for 13 years now. But again, here's the change. The change is that I started eating all this fruit. You would think that I would then need absurd amounts of insulin to eat all this fruit. So I'm eating nowadays 600, 700, sometimes 800 grams of total carbohydrate per day. And the insulin I'm injecting is somewhere between like 25 and 35 units. I mean, depending on how active I am, depending how consecutive my fitness has been. But like, I have some Instagram story highlights where people can see all the details. Recently, it's actually been under 30 units. But here's the percent change. If you do the math of, let's say, like a little over 30 units per day and like 750 grams of carbohydrate, you're going to come up with a 24-hour insulin sensitivity ratio somewhere around like 22 to 1, 24 to 1, 26 to 1. That is a 600% change in total insulin sensitivity going from 3 to 1 to 22 to 1. So I'm eating all of this carbohydrate energy, but I'm not needing excessive amounts of insulin. I'm actually using a physiological normal amount of insulin. And I think that's an important goal for people living with type 1 diabetes, is to live a lifestyle where the insulin you're injecting is close to what your pancreas would have normally been secreting prior to being, having beta cells that aren't working properly.
All right, wait. Let me stop you there because I have lots of questions about the food. But what you're saying about the normal amount of insulin is not what I was taught. I was always taught that if my son didn't have diabetes, his pancreas would produce whatever amount of insulin he would need. So, I mean, let's say, we're not talking about someone who's going to spend 20 years eating high-fat foods, fast foods, cupcakes every day. Let's say someone who has, kind of an everything in moderation diet. Wouldn't their body just produce whatever amount of insulin they would need? Or is there a study or something that says, no, you should only be producing 30 units of insulin a day?
So this is a great question. It's an important question. So there is research that shows how much insulin a healthy human will produce, over a 24-hour period. And it's somewhere between, 25 and 50 units per day.
That's fascinating. I'll have to look those up because I really didn't realize there was a, kind of a standard or a normal. I just thought it was, okay, if you're eating this, then that's what your body does. If you're a teenager, then this is what your body puts out, if you're pregnant.
Absolutely. No, there's definitely a range. And, this definitely goes into the whole research of insulin resistance and what's happening in prediabetes and type 2 diabetes and, doctors who monitor fasting insulin levels and sort of markers like that in order to get an idea of somebody's state of health, which, again, I think it's an important conversation that's not happening often enough in the type 1 world, which is the fact that we actually can very easily monitor our insulin sensitivity. Type 1s are the most fascinating test subjects for insulin sensitivity on a meal-by-meal basis. And that's sort of why, part of the reason Cyrus and I are so passionate about what we do is because as people living with type 1 diabetes, we live, eat, sleep, live, and breathe insulin sensitivity on a meal-by-meal basis. And we know that that is the solution to people living with prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. That is the cause of their condition. It's insulin resistance. If you can learn how to reverse that and maximize your insulin sensitivity and be able to utilize the insulin that your pancreas is still producing, then they can just become free of diabetes. And this has been shown in peer-reviewed research for almost 100 years now.
Okay, so let's go back to the food, because if you told me that I was going to eat a pyramid of bananas or, maybe add some lettuce, I would tell you that's not happening. Get out of the car. We're done. So tell me a little bit more about what you eat on a day-to-day basis, if you don't mind. And I won't, I won't judge. I'm just going to say, tell me a little bit more about what you eat on a day-to-day basis.
This is such an important question. And I will get to what I eat. But I want to start off with the passion and understanding that Cyrus and I both have for making sure that people who decide to, follow our program or join our coaching program absolutely love every single meal. Like, we are very passionate about that, and we really work with people about getting specific feedback about the types of foods they like, the texture, the different flavors to add. And there's so many different ways to do this, low-fat, plant-based, whole food approach that we're talking about. So we've actually put it into a very simple, easy-to-follow, traffic light system.
Okay, so tell me a meal about a client would eat, perhaps, rather than because you're obviously able to limit yourself in certain ways.
Yeah, so basically it's going to come down to picking specific ingredients. So we have a green light, yellow light, red light category. So the green light foods include fruits, starchy vegetables, legumes, intact whole grains. Then you have leafy greens, non-starchy vegetables, herbs and spices, and mushrooms. Those are all the foods in the green light category. And any given meal, we teach people, can include any combination of those ingredients that they desire. And the reason they're green light on our program is because they're very nutrient dense, they're high in water content, they're high in fiber, those are not unprocessed foods, and they also are low in their fat content. So that's really the key of what we're doing here. That's why I can eat so many grams of carbohydrate and not need an excessive amount of insulin, and actually just use a physiological normal amount of insulin. It's because we have reduced our fat intake.
Okay, so give me an example of a green light meal. Break it down. I'm looking at my plate. What's on it?
So for breakfast, you're going to have 1 to 4 of your favorite fruits. So this could be berries, pears, mangoes, papaya, bananas, you name it. 4 of your favorite fruits. Then you're going to have some greens or non-starchy vegetables. So it could be lettuce, could be arugula, it could be cucumbers, could be zucchini, stuff like that. And also ground flaxseed or ground chia seed in order to make sure you meet your essential fatty acid requirements as an insurance policy. So just by having a small amount of those ground up, you literally automatically right then and there, just in your breakfast meal, have met your essential fatty acid requirements. Even though it's not completely necessary, because if you ate enough calories from whole foods, you would also meet your requirements. But we're sort of doubling up and giving people an insurance policy. So fruit is our primary recommendation for breakfast. You could also have things like, hash browns for breakfast, or, this bean breakfast dishes. There's a variety of things there. Lunch would include, for most people, a much more starch-heavy meal. So that's things like potatoes, butternut squash, or a bean stew, something like that. But again, it's going to also have vegetables, going to have herbs and spices, going to a lot of times have mushrooms. The afternoon, a dinner meal. And again, that afternoon meal, the starch focus, is allowing people to eat the bulk of their energy at that meal, because that's when people are most active. And then you probably have a snack in the afternoon. Fruit's a great snack. Potatoes are a great snack, stuff like that. And then dinner would include, again, there's going to be a starch component, a bean component, maybe a fruit component, but it's going to be heavier on vegetables because we are not as active in the evening, most of us. And that's a good time to really focus on the vegetable nutrient density. And then again, people could have a dessert, a fruit-based dessert. I like something like nice cream or something. You take bananas, you put it through a blender, combine it with some wild blueberries, and it's really amazing. It's delicious. So they're very simple meals. And again, everything is whole. That's really the key nuance if somebody wants to truly do it 100%. But I also want to emphasize you don't need to do it 100% to get the results. But it's unrefined whole ingredients combined into bowls. That's really how it goes.
Right, got it. That's very, very eye-opening. That's very clear. Thank you. But I have to ask, I know a lot of people listening said potatoes, hash browns. Aren't people with diabetes not supposed to be able to eat that?
So, again, this is the fun part about talking to people There's many people living with type 1, type 2. The fact that we get to test our blood glucose on a meal-by-meal basis makes this condition very unique. So if somebody has heart disease or they have cancer, they can't really see, did things get better or worse based on that specific meal? You don't really know. You don't have a key metric. So I'm sure a lot of people listening to the show have eaten a potato, eaten a starch-heavy meal, eaten some bananas, and they just saw their blood glucose skyrocket. And they're like, man, how is this guy Robby telling me that food is not the reason that I just saw my blood glucose meter go to 200, 250, 300? And here's the deal. This is the eye-opener. What's happening in that case is you are likely, again, there could be nuances around insulin timing, which I will get into for type 1 diabetes. But in general, let's say we're talking about type 2. The reason that when you ate the banana, you ate the quinoa, you saw high blood glucose is because you're living with insulin resistance. And it's because what you ate prior to that meal, which has brought about the state of insulin resistance. And what that is, insulin resistance is when your body is struggling to take glucose out of your bloodstream and into your cells. All right. And this is caused, the primary cause is when there is fat stored in cells that are not designed to store fat. So your adipose tissue is designed to store fat. Okay, you're supposed to have a little bit of fat in your muscle and a little bit of fat in your liver cells. But when you have excess, it inhibits the function of insulin. Okay? Insulin is supposed to be able to open the door and allow glucose to go out of your bloodstream into your cells. When that function is not working, your blood glucose level goes up and up and up. And that's what's happening in pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes. That's the cause. Now, this is also a major problem for people living with type 1 diabetes, type 1.5 diabetes, and insulin-dependent type 2. So the insulin we're injecting isn't working as efficiently or properly, and that is the result. That is why a high carbohydrate meal will result in a high blood glucose reading. So as you begin to lower the fat in your diet, and these cells that have fat that's not supposed to be there starts to get cleared out, all of a sudden, insulin works again. So for me, for example, I know this is a little crazy for people, but I just had a lunch today that was 230 grams of carbohydrate at one meal. And I know that that's more carbohydrate than some low-carb people would eat in an entire week. So I had mangoes, I had white sapote, I had mamey sapote, I had spinach, and I had arugula. That was my lunch. I injected 4.5 units of insulin for that meal. And then I can see on my Dexcom, I can see the profile. It goes up to, maybe 130, 140, comes right back down. And this is insulin sensitivity in action. And anybody listening to the show can absolutely do an experiment and test that themselves and begin to observe, how can I make insulin work more efficiently in my body? It truly comes, it's wildly simple. It's wildly simple. It truly does come down to how many grams of fat you're consuming per day. And we encourage people to use nutrition software to just observe this. Just gather data. Just become consciously aware of how much fat you're consuming. And most people it's very eye-opening. It's very eye-opening. Fat is hidden. It's hidden everywhere. In a lot of the packaged foods, a lot of simple foods have added fat to them. And it's coming in the form of oils in a lot of cases. And simple plant foods like avocado, nuts, and seeds, they have a lot of fat in a very small quantity. So what we're teaching is to have people not consume more than 30 grams of total fat per day. Another metric is to not exceed 15% of total calories coming from fat. Once you meet either one of those thresholds, you will absolutely positively see your insulin sensitivity improve. And again, I know in human biology, there's a lot of complexities, a lot of nuances in science, but this one is truly black and white. I have never seen one single exception in the hundreds of type 1s that we've worked with thousands of people, but hundreds of type 1s. I have never seen a single exception of somebody increasing their whole carbohydrate content of their diet while simultaneously decreasing the fat and not see an objective improvement in insulin sensitivity. They will eat more total grams of carbohydrate and they will inject less insulin every single time, and it will happen in a matter of days. So we run 4-day retreats, and we see it every time at the retreats.
I just have to ask you. So the flip side of that is the very popular low carb, high fat diet, where you're not supposed to have more than 30 grams of carbohydrates in a day. I thought that fat kept you fuller, right? Isn't it important to have enough fat in your diet so that you feel sated?
Okay, this is such a fascinating conversation.
Knock it down.
It's so important. So we wrote about this in detail in our book, and we have a whole section on calorie density and satiety. And the leader in this whole field of research is Barbara Rolls at Penn State University. And she has done hundreds of studies on satiety. These are very complex studies. To try and study human satiety and change the macronutrients of various foods is actually quite difficult. When you read the study design, you're like, wow, that was brilliant. And it's very, very complicated, but it's fascinating research. And what she has found, she wrote a book called Volumetrics, which I'm sure many people have heard about. It was actually just ranked as far as like one of the best diets for 2020.
Volumetrics, I remember covering this like 20 years ago. What I remember from it the most, Robby, is that it was all about you eat the same volume of food every day. So maybe if you add like more soup, or more healthier food.
So you're getting at this. So the cover of the book is a bowl of soup, because what she learned in her research is that satiety is basically water plus fiber. It's bulk. It's those two things combined. And when she did research of them isolated, like just drinking water alone did not have the same impact on satiety as when you have the water in a whole food with the fiber. So your point is very valid, though, because so what I'm saying is there's a lot of research to point towards the diet that we're teaching here being very satisfying because of the bulk that's included, the water and the fiber in every meal. So it's definitely satisfying. People don't have to worry about that. But again, your point is valid. There are a lot of people who are doing a ketogenic diet. They're not, following those principles and having a lot of bulk, but they are staying quite satisfied. So there is an element of truth there. But when you look at and again, that's anecdotal stuff, which I know we've both heard. I have not seen much research, peer-reviewed published research on that specific topic. So I think there's more to be studied. And I honestly want to set up a podcast interview with Barbara Rolls just to ask her that specific question.
It's so funny because I was a health reporter for a lot of my career, and I remember Volumetrics, and I drank a lot of soup. I remember. So wait, before I start wrapping this up, I do want to ask you, I know that your goal initially, as you said, was to try to reverse type 1 diabetes, right? What's going to cure this for me? And obviously you haven't stopped taking insulin. You're not at all telling people to do that. But when you look at how you're living and what this plan and your partnership with Cyrus has led you to, is that still in the back of your mind?
It absolutely is in the back of my mind that we got to figure this out. Stacey, do you agree? Like, it doesn't seem that complicated. I mean, why can't we why can't we just get them to work? You know what I mean? Like cells die all the time. And then there's stem cells that create new ones. Why are the beta cells so difficult to recreate?
I'm not smart enough to know, but I do think it's a lot more complicated. I mean, no autoimmune disease has yet been cured. So I'm very, very, very hopeful. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I don't know that diet alone, of course, will ever do it. But the things you mentioned right there, I'm very, very hopeful about. But are you still feeling like you're the walking experiment?
So I couldn't agree more that after 13 years of doing this, and hitting plateaus of insulin use on 2 different approaches, I think it's got to be more than diet as well, for sure. And I would love to be the experiment, like the first person that makes it happen. I would love for some miracle to happen. But yeah, it's definitely in the back of my mind. But I will definitely say it's not as much as the forefront as it was in the beginning. So the back of my mind is really the appropriate way to describe it. I think about it. I certainly try and be active in the community of researchers who's looking into this and learn from some of their research and glean insights. And I want to participate.
Excellent. So the book, Mastering Diabetes, is for everybody with all different types of diabetes. It's not just about type 1, right?
So the answer is yes. And it's really for people who are living with insulin resistance. So that's everybody with prediabetes. That's everybody with type 2 diabetes. That's people living with gestational diabetes. And that's majority of people living with type 1 and type 1.5 diabetes. And it's also people who don't have diabetes yet. So in America, we have over 80 million people living with prediabetes that don't even know it. But then there's also a big chunk of people who are living with insulin resistance who haven't gotten to type 2 diabetes or prediabetes yet. So insulin resistance is really at the core of what we're teaching here. And the reason is because insulin resistance is the central node for a wide range of chronic health conditions. So when you're living with insulin resistance, you're increasing your risk for heart disease, for cancer, for chronic kidney disease, for high blood pressure, high cholesterol, for erectile dysfunction, for depression. It's a long, long list of unfortunate conditions that are associated with insulin resistance. And that's part of the reason we're passionate about getting this message out to the type 1 diabetes community as well, because we don't die of high blood glucose readings. We die of the complications of diabetes, number one being heart disease. So inside this book, we also cover the science and research of people who've actually been able to reverse heart disease, and that whole connection between maximizing your insulin sensitivity for your long-term health, but also for your short-term health in having more energy, for getting rid of brain fog, for reaching your ideal weight. It really truly does come back to this one simple concept. If you can focus on how to maximize your insulin sensitivity, you are setting yourself up for success in the short term and the long term. So the subtitle of the book is The Revolutionary Method to Reverse Insulin Resistance Permanently in Type 1, Type 1.5, Type 2, Prediabetes, and Gestational Diabetes.
Well, I'm really excited to learn more about you. And, hopefully down the road we can have Cyrus on the show as well. But one more question before I let you go. What are you having for dinner tonight?
Okay, so tonight I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm having for dinner because I enter it into nutrition software. I personally enjoy entering my food into nutrition software because
I can tell.
I like dialing in the ratios. I really, really enjoy the confidence of, okay, this is exactly what I'm having, and I feel really confident in this specific dose of insulin. And for people who don't like using nutrition software, we advocate this idea of go-to meals. And you sort of know this intuitively as a type 1 mom, but you make certain meals that you already know the carbohydrate content. Like, it's the same thing. It's this apple, it's this potato, it's this banana, whatever it is. It's some combination of these, ingredients. And I know this amount equals this many carbohydrate, this many grams carbohydrate, and, we can know what to dose. So dinner tonight is going to include lettuce, arugula, oranges, mangoes, papayas, and carrots. And it's going to be a total of 110 grams of carbohydrates. And I will also add that this meal is going to have 2.6 grams of fat in it all by itself, naturally, without having to add any specifically high-fat foods. And in the book, we also go into detail about how much fat do you need to absorb fat-soluble vitamins. And the research on that is really fascinating. So I hope people check it out.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's absolutely fascinating. I'm thrilled to have you on to learn more because I've seen pictures of the fruits and the plates and I haven't seen the banana pyramid, but we've seen lots of stuff online. So I really appreciate you taking the time to explain it. Thanks for coming on.
It's great to connect with you, and I really appreciate you having me on. Thanks again.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
I will link up more information on the things we talked about, including some studies and some insulin resistance stuff that you might find interesting. I got to tell you, though, I was distracted a lot once early in the interview when he was talking about bananas. And I didn't tell him this. I probably should have. I hate bananas. I hate them so much. I don't like the way they smell. I don't like the way they feel. I can't stand them. I do like banana bread. It's not the flavoring so much, I guess, when I think about it, although it's only banana bread. I don't like banana flavored candy. I don't like banana flavored ice cream. So when he kept talking about that, I was like, oh, enough. Okay, so I will link up more about Robby and Cyrus and their podcast and their book at diabetes-connections.com. Up next, tell me something good. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. And when you have a toddler diagnosed with type 1, like we did, you hear rumblings for a long time about the teen years. Everybody dreads that. But, it hit us at full force a little bit early. I was so glad we had Dexcom. Benny's insulin needs started going way up around age 11, and he has grown, 7 inches in the last 4 years, along with all those hormone swings. I can't really imagine managing diabetes during this crazy time. Without the Dexcom continuous glucose monitoring system, we can react more quickly to highs and lows, see trends, and adjust insulin doses with advice from our endocrinologist. I know using the Dexcom G6 has helped improve Benny's A1C and overall health. If your glucose alerts and readings from the G6 do not match symptoms or expectations, use a blood glucose meter to make diabetes treatment decisions. To learn more, just go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. I always ask for good news stories in the Facebook group. It is Diabetes Connections, the group. I really hope you can join us there. If you're not there already, I love how the group is going. Very supportive. We talk about the podcast a bit, but it's not just about that. So please come check it out and, find people that are well educated and smart and fun and living their best lives with diabetes. This week's Tell Me Something Good is a story I read in another Facebook group, actually, and asked if I can share. And Cindy said yes. So let me read you her post. Hi, I want to tell you about something I'm very excited about. I'm a scuba diver and an underwater photographer. I've been diving since 1985. I have over 1,700 dives, but I got diagnosed with type 1 last June of 2019. I was concerned about ever diving again. That was my first question for the doctors. We dive in remote places. We dive for weeks when we go, but we went ahead and booked a trip in the Philippines in January for 3 weeks. We have been here before. We know the manager. We know a lot of the divers. So she had a whole plan. It included wearing a Dexcom. She was going to wear the Libre sensor as a backup. She brought a meter, of course, as a backup. She was wearing her pump, tandem pump, went out of the water between dives, and bringing long-acting pens for a backup. Here's what she did. 56 dives in 3 weeks. Dives were 60 to 75 minutes each. Each dive was 50 to 100 feet deep. She tried to get her blood glucose to about 140 before going into the dive. She only missed one dive because of being low. She had to wait for her numbers to trend up on another one. She did carry orange juice and snacks on the boat. She did plug in a few times to the pump to correct. And she ran higher than she usually did, which she really didn't worry about. And I'm so glad to hear this because it was her first time diving. And overall, her nights were nicely in range. So she says, here is the exciting news. Her Dexcom worked great. She had it kind of stuck under the wetsuit with a patch. She did a couple of things to kind of keep it on, but it didn't come loose. The Libre also didn't come loose. She put a patch over it. She let everybody on the boat know that she had diabetes. She wanted to make sure that people around her were informed. Her friend and her husband would check in every single time she was about to go under with, what's your number? She also carried a tube of jelly. She says you can get this on Amazon, a tiny tube of sugary jelly. You can break the tip off and squirt some in your mouth, regulator and all. That's scuba gear, the regulator. She does give a little bit of advice for other divers here. I mean, she was a diver for 35 years before she was diagnosed. This is a post in the Type 1 Diabetic Athletes group on Facebook. But if you'd like to get in touch with Cindy, if you have questions, I have a feeling she'd be more than happy to help you out. And I would be more than happy to connect you. If you're thinking about scuba diving and you haven't done it before, or you are interested in getting back on the wagon if you've been diagnosed, she says that she really wants people to get back in the swing of it. She also says, I am not telling you how to manage your diabetes underwater or telling you Dexcom works perfectly underwater. I'm just sharing my experience and excitement of being able to do what I love to do. And she posted a bunch of pictures. I'll share a couple of these in the Facebook group. I think this is excellent advice. And I'm just so happy that somebody was able to get back to doing what they love after being diagnosed with diabetes. Because that's what we tell our kids, right? You can do anything. But, it can be complicated. So way to go, Cindy. This is fantastic. I'm so excited for you. And the picture she posted of the fish and some of the underwater stuff is breathtaking. Let me know if you have a Tell Me Something Good story. It can be anything like this. It can be a milestone with your kids. it can just be something that is good news for our community. Email me, Stacey@diabetes-connections.com, or post it on Facebook. Just tell me something good. A huge thank you to everybody who has posted recently about the world's worst diabetes mom. As I travel more and do this book tour, it is just incredible to hear everybody else's worst stories. I mean, we all have them. And to learn what the book is beginning to mean to a lot of people. I did have some interesting feedback when I went to Maine. They've given it to their clinic. The group that I spoke with bought some copies and gave it to their local pediatric endocrinology group to give to some newly diagnosed families, which I thought was fantastic. If that's something you're interested in, if you have a clinic or a diabetes office or a group that is interested in having books on hand, obviously you can buy them and give them out, but please get in touch with me, because when it's a situation like that, I'm sure we can figure something out, either discounted pricing or, maybe we can find something. I'm pretty good with sponsors, and I'd love to make the book available to more people. And that hadn't occurred to me that clinics might want it. So if your endo is interested, or if you're a healthcare professional and you're listening, if you're a CDE, please let me know. I'd love to start working things out. I'm going to work on this on my side as well, but just let me know. Coming up in March, I'm going to be in Wilmington, North Carolina, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and then out to Indianapolis. Can't wait to meet so many of you as you listen and as you read. Boy, is this fun. Thank you, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. In a couple of days, we've got our mini episode that airs on Thursday. And this week, I am going to be talking about when a child has a fear of diabetes. When, we tell our kids, oh, it won't hold you back. But what happens when a parent tells a little kid, no, it's not going to hold you back? And the kid says, I'm scared. I think it will hold me back, and I don't want to do this new activity. This was a heartbreaker. So we're going to talk about it and kind of find out what to do. All right, I'm Stacey Simms, and I'll see you back here on Thursday.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Simms Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.